Hello again, Zach Wilson, Hood County Chess Club here, continuing the series on attacking the king. Today we're going to look at mating techniques for checkmating the king when he's in the center of the board, not in a castled position. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want you to notice is the starting position of where the kings are when the kings are located in the center of the board, and why it's important to castle. These mating techniques will really show us the vulnerability of the king in the center of the board. First thing I want to look at is the pawns, and what we can see here is that the rook pawns are simply protected by the rook at the start of the game, and then the pawns in front of our knights are actually protected by the neighboring bishops, okay? And then the center pawns are protected by 4 pieces each. You can see that the knights can protect them, the bishops can protect them, the king and queen protect both of them, and that's a whole lot of green arrows, okay. But what we didn't talk about is the pawn on the F file, or known as the F pawn. For beginners, we often call him Foolish Freddy, the alliteration of the letter F there, to remind you that Foolish Freddy does not want to move in the opening because he protects the king while he's vulnerable in the center of the board. What I want you to notice about these pawns is the diagonal that would be opened up if the pawn was to be vacated from their position. The reason this is important is that if we look at these squares on this diagonal, you'll notice that the knight can't go to any of those squares. You can see the green dots when I touch the knight of where it would go. You can see that this bishop goes around that pawn. It can't get there. Of course, the rook isn't going to get there either. The only thing protecting this pawn is the king itself. And we all know that, of course, the king can never put itself in check. So if you have a battery assault where one piece attacks defended by another, the king could never capture back. And we're going to take a look and see what some of that looks like right now. So first, let's talk about what happens if Foolish Freddy moves and opens up this key diagonal against the king. So we'll just make a foolish move. Foolish Freddy charges into the fray, and this is actually an official opening. It's called the King's Gambit. He is taking a chance here, and oftentimes black will simply respond with this pawn, wondering if white knows what's coming. The queen now has access to h4, which shoots down this diagonal, and what's going to possibly protect? The rook can't get to this diagonal, covering these squares. The knight can't get there. The bishop can't get there. The only thing that can get there is this pawn moving forward. So this next move is called the Fool's Mate, because only a fool would make this move, leading to checkmate. You can see here that the queen comes in on the second move of the game, and it's already over. King trapped in the center, checkmate. So the Fool's Mate is great to know and understand to teach you the vulnerability of the king in the center. This is why we talk about developing your pieces quickly and getting your king castled to safety. Let's look at our next example. Instead of just 2 moves, it goes 4 moves. It's called the Scholar's Mate. You may have seen this before. And again, it takes advantage of this weakened square that is only defended by the king. So we'll make some normal moves here. King's pawn, very normal. Bishop to c4, very normal. We see this in a lot of openings like the Italian game. And knight to c6, a pretty typical maneuver, but it's usually in response to knight to f3 because it's attacking this pawn and it's simply providing a defense. Here, it's not really doing anything because this bishop is not attacking the pawn in the center. This bishop is attacking the weak square. So black should have been aware of the weak square. So now white makes a serious threat on move 3. We can see that this queen could capture the pawn. She would be defended by this bishop, and that's checkmate. So if you've never seen the Scholar's Mate, you want to memorize this pattern, not because you want to try it against your opponent, but because you don't want to make this foolish move. Oh, look, there's a queen. I think I'll attack the queen. Except that that does nothing to prevent the checkmate. And there it is, Scholar's Mate, game over. And that was only on the 4th move of the game. And notice these are happening very quickly because the king is in the center of the board. If you look at our previous examples in Attacking the King series, the variety of mating patterns, they're all happening in the middle game after the king has castled. And so it's about attacking that castled position. This is what happens if your opponent just ignores king safety right out of the gate. All right, so let's go to the year 1750. A chess master named Legal, that's his last name. I don't know his first name off the top of my head, but Legal's mate is checkmate in 7 moves in the opening. And again, we're going to see some typical opening moves. Both pawns coming out, king's pawn to the center. Okay, typical knight to f3. This time d6 protecting the pawn in the center instead of the usual knight to c6 that would also protect this pawn. Now we just simply have pawn support. The pawn is defended. So again, the typical bishop to c4 and doing what? Attacking the weak square right away. A lot of times when you open with a king's pawn, you're going to see this bishop come out immediately attacking the weak square. That's why it's important. You've got to get your king to safety. Well, okay, very typical maneuver, simply pinning the knight. And as we're going to see here, the difference between a soft pin and a hard pin. All right, develop a piece. And black makes a very odd move here. The idea, I suppose, is just simply to protect this square from an incoming knight, or maybe if they wanted to reposition the bishop, but it just simply wastes time, and it leaves the king in the center of the board, and it leaves the f7 square completely undefended. And so if you haven't seen this Legal's mate before, the attack happens immediately. All right, so in comes the knight. And this is the technique. We have allowed our queen to be put in danger. And at the same time, we are attacking the undefended bishop. So this move only works because black's bishop is undefended and can be attacked. So at a minimum here, we're probably going to win this piece back, unless black doesn't know what's coming. So it's important to study these simple mating patterns that happen in the very opening of the game to avoid falling prey to them. Well, black sees a queen, thinks a mistake has been made, takes the queen, and now what black should have noticed is that the knight is also attacking the f7 square, and it's attacking the d7 square. So both of these squares in the king's position are already under attack, and he's blocked in by his own pieces. So black's king is in danger, and here comes the check. Protected by the knight, so the king cannot take. And remember what we said, these opening pawns are not covered by anything else except by the king, and he cannot capture because he cannot put himself in check. So noticing that the knight is covering these squares, he only has one square to move to. So he moves to that square and checkmate. Game over. This knight causes the check. This bishop's covering here and here. This knight is covering here and the bishop. These pieces are all in his way, blocking him in. Boy, that's a lot of colors. Let's get rid of that. What you can see is occupied, covered, occupied, covered, covered. Okay. Covered by the bishop, occupied, covered by the knight, and checkmate. So let's back that up to the beginning and take a look at that. Seemingly normal, innocent opening moves, attacking the center, developing pieces, and then white makes this curious move. Knowing that the attack is coming, black should have done something, anything, to protect this square or protect this bishop. But he didn't. He got greedy and took the queen, and then it was just a matter of a couple of moves and the game was over. So this is called Legal's mate. Again, 1750. It's been around a while. You definitely want to study it and memorize it and see if you can create pressure from the opening of the game, whatever side you're on, noticing that the outside diagonal for the fool's mate or the scholar's mate, and just this square in general, is weak. All right, so let's look at Reti versus Tartakower in Vienna, 1910 or 1911. Different people label the year differently. It does have the nickname Sucker Punch. This game's over in 11 moves. And keep in mind, an average chess game is 40 moves, so 11 is still quite fast. So again, typical opening. This is called the Caro-Kann. I play this one as black very often. White gets the center. Black is simply attacking the center with a flank pawn. And there's a lot that can happen with the Caro-Kann. It's a very aggressive counter-attacking defense. I encourage you to check it out. It's a really great defense. But for right now, we're not going to worry about the standard moves. Typically, white could advance. White could capture and exchange. Or the more common main line, just knight to c3, defending this pawn. So in true fashion, captures. Okay. Captures. These are all mainline moves. And then there's a lot of things black can do here. The most common is bringing this bishop out, attacking the knight, trying to get the bishop out before this pawn moves forward. Another idea by Karpov is to bring this knight over to d7. The third most popular here is knight to f6, just simply attacking the knight. He does risk this capture and the doubling of the pawns. Okay. But white ignores that. Reti ignores that and just simply develops his bishop. And black attacks with the e-pawn, keeping this line open rather than closing it off by moving the pawn one square forward, which is more common. Just trying to open the center, but you shouldn't open the center while your king is in the center. It makes your king, again, very vulnerable by not castling. So here we simply capture, and white is offering a trade of queens. So there's an opportunity to trade queens here. But black thinks he finds an interesting tactic here. If you want to find the tactic to win a free pawn, you can pause the video here. But the move is queen to a5 check, and you can see that it's forking the king and the undefended pawn, keeping the queens on the board. So we simply defend with the bishop, attacking the queen, forcing her to move. She was going to move anyways, and take that pawn. So far, everything seems normal here. But remember, we talk about castling and get your king out of the center. Well, most of us are used to castling to the king side. But here you can see that all of these spaces have been open, and so Reti is ready to, Reti, R-E-T-I, is ready, R-E-A-D-Y, to castle queenside, and there we go. And what's great about castling queenside and why he put his queen up here on d3 to begin with is that it lines up naturally with this rook attacking into the king's position. And notice the king is not castled, and he's nowhere near castling because this bishop at a minimum is in the way. Okay, so black simply attacks this knight. Let's back that move up for just a moment. When Reti castled, he left this knight in danger. It is only defended by one queen. It is attacked by a queen and a knight. Anytime you have more attackers than defenders, you're going to win that piece. So he takes the free knight. And so now what's going to happen? If white takes and black takes, now you've lost your queen for a knight. There's no taking back. So Tartakower was feeling very proud of himself and thought, man, I picked up that pawn with my queen. I picked up a knight with my knight. Reti's just falling apart here. And then Reti launched his attack. And here we go. Can you find it? What would you do in this position to win the game right now? Queen check, d8. Okay, queen sacrifice. The only thing that can take it is the king. And if he doesn't take it, he can't run away because it's covered, right? So he's forced to capture this queen. So now he's not going to castle. He's stuck in the center. But man, what is Reti doing here? He's thrown away a pawn. He's thrown away a knight. He's thrown away a queen. Can you find the move that follows it up? Why would he throw his queen away? Double check. The bishop is checking the king. The rook is a discovered check. And anytime there's a double check, you cannot capture the piece, because if the queen tried to capture the bishop, well, that doesn't stop the check from the rook. Okay. You can't block. I mean, if the queen simply tried to block the attack from the rook, well, it doesn't stop the bishop. And if she tried to block the rook from the... Well, all you can do is run away here. And where would you move as black's king? That's in danger from the bishop. That's in danger from the rook. So it only leaves you two choices. Option number one, which happened in the game, was the king tried to run away and checkmate. Protected by the rook, the bishop delivers checkmate. There's nowhere for this king to go. Okay, well, what if he had tried the other option? Do you see the alternate checkmate? Checkmate. The rook is taking care of business, defended by the bishop. So if we just back that up from the very beginning, you can see here that it might have looked like Reti didn't know what he was doing, but early on, he brought this queen into play knowing he was going to castle to the queen side and bring that rook to line up with her. Black made the mistake of opening the position and not trading off the queens, thinking he could pick up a free pawn. And then Reti sees his opportunity, castles and prepares the attack, and says, go ahead, I dare you to take this free knight. Black fell for it, sacrifice, check, and it doesn't matter where he goes, checkmate. So this is Reti's mate, and it's very important to study it for the purpose of truly understanding that your king in the center of the board is in danger. Okay, one last example here, the Evans Gambit. Evans Gambit is a very strong attack by white. There's lots of things that can happen here, but there's also many ways black can go wrong. We'll just look at a couple of them very quickly. This game ends in 10 moves, again, far short of the average of 40. So typical king's pawn opening, the Italian game attacking f7, okay, and the gambit. We're offering up a free pawn to black. And if you study the Evans Gambit, it really doesn't matter if this bishop accepts the gambit by taking, or if it retreats, or if it retreats another way. There's lots of things that white can do here, lots of attacking ideas. That's why it's so popular and why white doesn't mind giving up this pawn for attacking chances. In this example, the gambit is accepted, and we attack the bishop, and it retreats back to home base, so to speak. We attack the center, and now look at this. These two are lined up and ready to go. And so black sees something here. Black says, you know, I could cause a fork and win one of these pieces right now. And that's the mistake. It's a trap. In comes the check. Black moves. In comes another check, sacrificing a piece. Checkmate. You can see that the queen is covering all the escape squares, attacking, and covered. Okay. So if we back that up a few moves, well, what if black saw this coming and instead said, man, this is in danger. Maybe I should protect that square. Well, that's great, except for this problem right here. Let's remove the defender. Now let's attack again. Checkmate. Okay. What if black decided to move to this side? All right. We pull out, and notice we're one move away from the queen coming in and saying checkmate. This rook can't defend that square. This bishop can't defend that square. This knight can't defend that square. I suppose you could move this bishop here just for the queen to take it and then still checkmate you on the next turn. So to avoid checkmate, what are you going to do? Move your queen here to defend this square? Well, fine. I'll just take your queen, and now I'll just win later. So I hope you enjoyed these examples of the fool's mate, the scholar's mate, Legal's mate, Reti's mate, and the Evans Gambit that all take advantage of the king's weakness being in the center of the board. Well, remember, you are what you repeat, so watch this video again, study the positions, practice them over the board with a friend until they become a part of your next game. Please visit us at Hood County Chess Club on Facebook and click the like button to keep up with us for local events.